I am glad you are able to join us today for this devotional. I was reminded this morning of the tenacity and persistence of many plant species to survive. But there are two in particular that I think of, especially after the shower that we had this week, a couple of showers. They catch my attention. My wife came to the office this morning, and as she was coming in the door, she noticed a small patch of goat heads. And you would think that after last year, I spent a great deal of the time every morning coming over and pulling up the weeds and pulling up those goat heads and making sure that none of them went to seed. And yet, we have a small shower, and all of a sudden, there is an abundance of these plants coming up. We also have in our front yard, when we moved here, a morning glory vine that was in the front planter there beside the porch. And I made sure, and it was something that I thought all my early years. And so I took down this small vine and got rid of it and as many seeds as is possible. And we're 3 years down the road, and we have not had a plant come to maturity or anything that could sprout a seed, anything that would produce a seed. And yet, still, after a shower or watering, there are many that come up. The seeds seem to be able to live there for years and years. They may lay on top of the soil or on top of the grass root and just wait for it to be covered at the right time with the right rain, and it comes up. Sometimes I will find one in the bed there or in the flower bed, and I will ease with it just a little bit and pull it out, and I'll have a root 5, maybe 6 inches long. And you're thinking, how does a plant that small and that seed, how does it come from 5 or 6 inches deep in the dirt and still remain when most plants we can't get to come up if they're over a half or 3/4 of an inch? And we wonder how they do these things and how they live, but they're relentless in their ability and willingness to survive for the species. Through all of these little things, I was reminded this morning of the relentlessness of Satan and his strivings to plant the seed of temptation. And no sooner than we have defeated one temptation, there's another before us to pluck and destroy or to cultivate. See, sometimes we take those sins, those things that are planted, and we cultivate them, even though we know they're going to take over our lives, and they're going to destroy everything that's there. In 1 Peter 5:8, he says, "Be sober-minded and be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." You see, Satan is relentless. He's like these little plants. He will do everything in the world to plant that temptation before you and offer you the opportunity to take and to cultivate that temptation into a sin and to work with it and hold it in your heart until it destroys what's within you. The way Satan deals. And so as a Christian, I'm also reminded, if this Satan is relentless, I must also, as a child of God, be relentless. I must face those temptations, or I must face him with tenacity and persistence, letting the seed of the Word of God be planted deep within me. I must cultivate this seed. I must bring it to a full growth, to something that is taken over my heart so completely that nothing else can enter in, nothing else can grow within that love of God, within that word that he's given us. I must come to full growth. I must be seeking it daily and uprooting the seed of temptation. I must be willing to spend my time weeding that garden that lies within my heart, making sure that I've not let anything enter in that would draw me away from God, making sure that I have pulled every, let's say, goat head and morning glory out of the way. Because once they begin to enter in and to be left alone, they take over the ground completely. Well, sin is much the same way. Once it's left there for a while, then it begins to take over completely the heart. It is important that we face Satan with tenacity and persistence and keep him shoved out, keep those temptations cleaned out of our heart. In Ephesians, the 6th chapter, in verse 10 through 13, he says, "Finally be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm." I want us to think about that this week as we enter into this week, as we go about the things that we do, as we meet the people we meet, as we face the difficulties we face. I want us to remember that we must weed the seed of temptation completely out of our heart and our life, and that we must be persistent in seeking to cultivate that word of God that we have put in there, that it might rule our lives instead of letting Satan rule the ground of our heart. I hope that you have an enjoyable week. I hope that you'll take this little bit of the word with you and think about it this week, striving to remain true to God, seeking to do the things He asks of us to do. Enjoy your week, and God bless each one of you. Thank you.